Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Terry Martin with the Illinois Channel. And once again, I'm joined with Jeff Berkowitz in Chicago. And this week, Jeff and I are going to be taking a look at a couple of things, including the election of 2026 here in Illinois and how some of that might play out, and some interesting names that are considering going back into the campaign mode. Also, then we'll be taking a look at some of the major things that have been happening in Washington this week. But Jeff, let's start off with what's happening in the election coming up in Illinois and some of the changing names. You know, we talked about Kristen Mitchell, who's running now as the running mate with the governor. What are some of the other things that you would say we should be looking for in 2026?
We'll look for perhaps the Republicans having a top of the ticket for their nominee for governor and their nominee for U.S. Senate. Those two folks may be credible opponents to the Democrats. They may have money, they will have organization, and they'll have a strong message. I predict. We've had a few people coming out for running for governor who are, I don't think they're going to have sufficient money to be a credible candidate. James Mendrick is one who's talked about, maybe he's actually said he's running for governor.
And who is James Mendrick?
And James Mendrick is the sheriff of DuPage County. So he does have a base. DuPage County in upstate is about 1 million people. So that's a significant number of people who know him. Should have some good name recognition there. I just don't think he's going to catch on as knowledgeable about the issues, which is, I think, going to be very, very important in both the Senate race and the governor's race in Illinois. And I don't think he's going to have the money or the organization. And Aaron Del Mar, another person, Cook County GOP chairman, he's talked of running. Who
was the running mate of Gary
Rabon.
Couldn't think of his name for a second.
Fine.
Some voters met around the state, Aaron Del Mar then. Although I don't think he has much of a profile, even though his name is semi-recognizable, what is his claim to being elected, would you say?
Well, I guess it would be that he's Cook County GOP chairman. Cook County has 5 million people there, but they don't do so well for Republicans in elections. You know, you come out of Cook County with sometimes a lead for the Democrats of 1 million votes. That's a lot to make up if you do it going downstate. So I don't know that being Cook County GOP chairman counts for much. It's just not much of an organization at this point. So you look and say, is there anybody who's likely, and we've been talking about likely Republican nominee as Ted Dabrowski. Todd Ricketts thought of this. He was going to possibly run for Senate, for governor. Todd's a part of we talked about the Ricketts family, which is the Chicago Cubs. There's money there. They know money. But I don't think Todd's going to run for either Senate or governor. If he does, I think now he'd probably be for governor. Don't think he runs. So that leaves, if I'm right, an open field. If Ted Dabrowski can gather the money, which I think he can, and he has enormous knowledge of the issues, and I think he's a good speaker, and he's getting well known around the state. He actually does a lot of radio shows when he talks from various places to people in Decatur and Quincy and just a variety of places downstate. And he's got a good relationship with Darren Bailey. Darren Bailey had a tough run when he ran for governor. He did very well downstate, but not so well upstate. If Darren Bailey knocks himself out for the Republican candidates for governor and U.S. Senate, we'll get to in a minute, Rich Porter. If he knocks himself out for Dabrowski and Porter, the top of the ticket, that could be really, really important.
Have you heard of Darren Bailey saying he's going to run again?
I've heard early on he was thinking about it, but not so much lately. So I think it's pretty unlikely. It's not impossible. Pretty unlikely that he will run again.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I know Darren Bailey somewhat from having covered him. I just don't think that he can win statewide because so many of the votes come in the Chicagoland area, and I just don't think he plays well there. And I think the votes that when he ran bear that out. Now that said, so what about someone like Congressman Ray or Darren LaHood? Have you heard of anything about him? Where I could see him being a candidate. I don't know if he's entertaining that or not, but I could see him being a candidate for governor.
I think he thought of it. He thought of running for the Senate. There was some push to get him to run for the Senate. He's been in Congress for a number of years. He's well known. He could have made the leap or could have made the transition. I think he decided he's fine where he is, so I don't think he'll run for the Senate. Don't think he'll run for governor. And that's where that stands.
So a good guy, I would say possibly too. And you know how this works. Someone might be whispering in his ear, look, we got 4 years of Trump. We're just starting off. Inevitably, there's going to be some changes in the cabinet or where we need a new undersecretary of something. So Darren LaHood, to me, has kind of proven himself to be a pretty stand-up guy, former federal prosecutor as well as a state senator and a congressman now for something like 10 years. So anyway, maybe he won't run because there are other things, non-elective office positions that he could be considered for. His father actually was picked by Obama to be U.S. Transportation Secretary, just as a reminder.
So let's put him aside for a moment. Let me say a few more words about Ted, then we'll get to
Ted Dabrowski.
Richard Porter. And so Ted Dabrowski, we've talked about him before.
Who's the president of WirePoints.
But more importantly, he has 15 years of corporate experience and actually on the ground with the Polish Revolution for Citibank. So a lot of corporate banking experience, but on the ground, as that country emerged from being a captive of the Soviet Union to being a free market-oriented country, that free market revolution, Ted's been a part of a revolution there. He was working on that for Citibank, helping them become integrated into the world economy, Poland. And he also is fluent in Spanish, which could be helpful. He's got parents who were immigrants from Ecuador and from Poland, so he's got that identification. And then perhaps most importantly, he spent the last 15 years learning about the problems of Illinois at the Illinois Policy Institute and at WirePoints, but more importantly, learning about and coming up with solutions to those problems. So this will be a campaign between JB Pritzker, I predict, and Ted Dabrowski, if Ted has anything to say about it, about the issues. It'll be a referendum on the 7 years of JB Pritzker. What has he done? Has he fixed the problems of the schools where 40% of the kids around the state of Illinois were basically illiterate? They can't read. Has he talked about that? Has he done anything? That'll be a referendum on JB Pritzker and Christian Mitchell, if he is, as where we've heard, the running mate. And so Ted will be talking about that. He'll be talking about crime. Yes, it's come down recently, but
okay,
it's come down
before we lose the forest for the trees, for governor, Ted Dabrowski, who are the candidates you're mentioning?
For governor,
who's running for on the Republican side for governor? Is there anyone besides Dabrowski? You said maybe.
Nobody.
Go ahead.
No, there are a few people I've mentioned. I mentioned Aaron Domar. I've mentioned James Mendrick. I don't think they're going to have sufficient funding, message, organization to keep up with Ted.
And you're saying Dabrowski will?
I say he will. That's my prediction. He hasn't gotten in yet. I think he will near the end of July.
Can he? I don't know how much money is going to have to be raised. We could speculate.
Yes.
But maybe $10 million. I mean, run against Pritzker, of course, the man has more money than Jesus, and
right.
So can Ted Dabrowski raise a reasonable amount of money to be competitive?
My prediction is yes. There is money out there, and people are having conversations. I can't go into them, but I know about them, and I think they will be sold on Ted Dabrowski carrying their message. There will be an alignment of donors and the candidate, which we haven't always had. We haven't had it all recently in the Illinois Republican Party. So that alignment is really key. Dick Uihlein is a key donor, and he
A
was
key
president of
Republican
Darren
donor.
Bailey.
Yeah.
He gave a lot to Darren Bailey, but there wasn't that alignment between Uline and Bailey. And it's not, and it also, I think
Let
the
me ask
donors.
on Dabrowski,
Yes, sir.
because people generally speaking don't know of him. You and I do.
Right. Right.
How would you, if a vote, for all those voters who don't know Ted Dabrowski, is he a hardcore social conservative? Is he a fiscal conservative? Where does he fall on the political spectrum? And can he win Democratic votes and independent votes?
I think he's conservative across the board, but two caveats. He has the style of somebody who's moderate, comes across as respectful and civil, so he can win over, not necessarily moderate in views or reasonable, but he can win over, I think, certainly the base. He's conservative enough for the Republican Party, Republican base. He can win over moderate Republican votes because of his style and his reasonableness. And I think he can win over moderate Democrats because, again, Democrats who he's across the board, but he's not going to come across as extreme. Is it extreme to want to teach kids how to read? Is it extreme to want to make the streets safe? Is it extreme to have a good economic climate that provides?
Okay, we know,
jobs?
but before we move away from this, what about who's going to be running for the Republican side for the Senate?
Right, and then
And on the Democratic side?
right, and let's start with the Republicans first for a change. I predict again Richard Porter because again, I think he will have funds. He is, remind people, 30 years or so as a partner at Kirkland and Ellis, a large
Out of
law firm.
Chicago with offices around the world, right?
So he should have access to money in Chicago from his law firm, not from his law firm, but from the partners individually giving, from the partners giving across the country, and partners perhaps even giving across the world to the extent that's permitted by the campaign finance laws. So, and the other thing about Richard Porter, although he's not been a candidate for office, he's been active in the Republican National Committee for like 12 years. And so he knows these issues. He knows the actual state issues, but he also knows the national issues. And he also knows people in half of the U.S. Senate, more than 50 of the senators. So he's experienced in the issues and what it takes to run as a candidate, even though he hasn't.
I mentioned this before. Porter knows both Peter Thiel and Elon Musk. They're both billionaires. So not only the lawyers at Kirkland Ellis, but he has two friends that have very deep pockets if Elon Musk so chooses to give money to them. Certainly he would be calling upon them, I would think, for donation. The other thing I would say, and you can add your thoughts, he is very polished, I would say. And I think he would play well, Richard Porter, in Chicago. He's one of them. And I think that was Darren Bailey's problem. The people of Chicago and the northern counties did not look upon Darren Bailey as one of them. Richard Porter would play well in the area of the state where the majority of votes are, but he would also, if he were the Republican candidate, obviously play well, I think, with the Republicans downstate. If you want to win statewide in Illinois as a Republican, I think you need to have somebody that has not only his credentials on paper, but the way he presents himself, I would argue would be favorable to his candidacy.
Well, let me say, Terry, on the issues, again, I interviewed him, as you know, and people can find this, they can find these things on my website, perhaps on yours.
And on mine, yeah.
YouTube.com.
Jeff interviewed, I don't remember, did you do 2 interviews with him? I don't remember if we did.
Yeah, there's 2 parts to Richard Porter.
Yeah.
And those were on state issues, so he knows that stuff.
Yeah, so we ought to have people listen, go to either of our channels, the Illinois Channel TV, and what's yours, Jeff? Your YouTube channel.
YouTube.com/Public Affairs TV.
And then put in Richard Porter, and I would think they would find it.
They're easy. You can glance and see it. But my point is...
And it's on the issues, so if you want to find out about them, yeah, go ahead, make your point.
This is important because there's a confluence, as people are going to see shortly, on this show between the state issues in Illinois and the national issues that a U.S. Senator will be involved in. So Porter and Dabrowski can go back and forth. And it's especially important for Porter because he is the guy running, I think, for the U.S. Senate, and the focus is on the national issues. And Ted Dabrowski is the guy running for governor, and the focus is on the state issues. But these two individuals mesh with each other, and these issues mesh with each other. But just to list some, Porter understands China as a strategic threat, militarily and economically. He understands the issue of tariffs. He understands Donald Trump, who is
Well,
transactional.
let's right now just focus on some of these candidates. We're going to get too mired. The people can go and look at your interviews and they'll hear from that. I want to make sure we get the names out.
No, I know. We'll get the names out. We got the names.
Well, we're going to
Let
run
me just
short on
finish.
time with some of the other
No, we're not
issues.
going to take an hour. Let me give me a minute or so to
Go,
talk about
go.
Porter on issues. Okay. He understands immigration, which is an important national and state issue. He certainly understands the border issue. So he's got a good feel for domestic policies nationally and foreign policies nationally. And he understands understands the social issues. So
I
there's
would
a
also
good
say he knows, which a lot of people don't. People would be surprised. I know this from covering Congress and the state legislature. A lot of people in public office are financially illiterate. They don't know how the economy works, and they vote on things with that lack of knowledge. Richard Porter is financially literate. He knows in an economy how the pieces come together.
Well, it's important to understand the economic issues, which he does, and the financial literacy. It's also important to understand the foreign policy threats of China and Russia and Iran and North Korea. Porter knows that. And again, last, he was the domestic policy, the young whiz kid in Bush 41, George Herbert Walker Bush. So in the late 80s and early
30 years
90s,
ago.
Porter was there heading up the Domestic Policy Council for George Herbert Walker Bush.
Which means he
So-
also knows, he understands the tenor of Washington, D.C. He's been there. He knows the feel in the buildings. He knows how that works. It's not like Mr. Smith goes to Washington, where you have a babe in the woods not knowing how the pieces come together. One other name I want to talk about as far as running for Congress, a name we haven't heard for a long time, is going to be Jesse Jackson Jr., who was a congressman. Last time I interviewed him was in 2008 at the Democratic Convention, so it's been a while. But he got into some trouble, had to spend some time in prison, but now he's been out for a while, and he's taking a look at maybe running for Congress again. What's your thoughts on Jesse Jackson Jr.?
Well, I will find this later, but I interviewed Jesse Jackson in 2007, 2008. He was in Congress. He got elected in 1995 in a special election, and he was there until 2012. So he had 17 years of congressional experience. He grew up in a political and social family because he's the son of Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. It was also well known throughout the state and especially in Chicago for Operation Push, and ran for president, I believe it was in 1984. And Jesse ran into some problems, campaign finance issues. I think he pled guilty he was indicted in 2012. Shortly thereafter, I think pled guilty, served some time. He's come out. He's, I think, endeavored to rehabilitate himself, and perhaps he has. And now he's thinking of running for his old seat, the 2nd District in Illinois, which happens to be vacant, interestingly enough, as the person who replaced Jesse in a special election in 2012, I believe it was Robin Kelly. Robin Kelly is now one of the 3 people who's running to replace Dick Durbin. She's running in a 3-candidate Democratic primary against Pritzker's handpicked favorite, his former Lieutenant Governor, Juliana Stratton, and Robin Kelly's running against Raja Krishnamurthy, previously 8 years the congressman from the 8th Congressional District. So there are those three candidates. That's going to be a tough primary. Porter has said that could be a very
Well, the
bloody
other thing is if you have
primary.
Juliana Stratton, the current lieutenant governor, running, a black woman, and you have Congresswoman Robin Kelly, a black woman,
Right.
it's going to be interesting because then you get Raja Krishnamurthy, who is from Asian Indian descent. He was born in America, but his parents, I think, are from India. A good guy, I mean, personable, and I think Raja Krishnamurthy, because of if those two candidates, two black women, stay in the race, it could allow a crack for Raja Krishnamurthy. And as you've mentioned in previous shows, he has already raised a considerable amount of money to run for a U.S. Senate seat.
Excuse me, Terry, $20 million. And most congressional
And that's a year out. I mean, when the race is still a year out, he has
Right,
$20
right.
million.
And Juliana Stratton won't be wanting for money with Pritzker backing her.
Right.
So she could be talking 10, 20, 30 million dollars coming in through PACs. Maybe she's not taking PAC money, but there'll be independent expenditure committees probably. And Robin Kelly's been no slouch. She's got off to a good start. I think she's somewhere at $2.5 million. So, and had a very big quarter. I think it was at the rate of 2.5.
What do you think of Robin Kelly? Let's talk about what we know of them, personality-wise. Not. I mean, you got to have the right personality, or you can have all the right answers to the issues. But if you're terminally dull, you're not going to get elected.
She's not dull. She came in, she had a winner weigh in a special election to replace Jesse Jackson. So it was no easy feat just winning, as I recall, the Democratic primary at that time, and then ran in a Democratic district, so the general election was probably easier. But her personality is a stable one. People like Robin Kelly.
She seems to have a pleasant, I think she comes across, my interpretation, and I don't know her well. I've met her on a few occasions. She seems to come off well as a pleasant person, as I would say does Juliana Stratton. Actually, Juliana Stratton, when you meet her in person, I think she comes off better than some of the speeches she has made when she's appearing alongside the governor at some announcement. She comes off a little strident, I would say, in her talks.
Well, one advantage that both Robin Kelly and Raja Krishnamurthy have relative to Juliana Stratton is they both have had a substantial amount of what we'll call national experience. Robin Kelly's been a congresswoman now for about 12 years, dealing with domestic policy issues and foreign policy issues. And Raja Krishnamurthy has been a congressman for 8 years, similarly dealing with domestic and foreign policy issues, where Juliana Stratton has been a lieutenant governor dealing with state issues. So that matters, that experience, that comfort level. And so it'll be an interesting race, but as Porter has pointed out, they may bloody each other up, and whoever emerges from that may not be that strong after the primary. I don't think he's going to have a sharply contested primary.
All right, I want to transition here. We've talked about the candidates, we'll see, but Jeff, you got to run. The whole purpose is running on the issues. And the Democratic Party right now is, as Rahm Emanuel said, less popular than Elon Musk. So they really have their work cut out for them. And they're running, their main message as a Democratic Party right now, I would say, is Trump sucks. That's basically how you slice and dice it. And yet the president continues this week to run up new favorable scores. We have the U.S. Treasury Department saying that in June, and the country had a surplus for the month of June of $27 billion, and they attribute that profit to the monies coming in from the president applying surpluses. And by the way, as you were talking, I just got a news flash on that topic. The president has just announced a trade deal with Indonesia, in which Indonesia will be paying a 19% tariff on the products that they are bringing in. Also this week, the president just yesterday announced what I thought was a pretty slick deal. We've been sending arms to Ukraine, and as people know who have followed politics, last month the president went to NATO in Europe, and the NATO members agreed to pay 5% of their GDP to fund NATO. That was up from 2%. And as a consequence, yesterday it was announced, in part because Trump is irritated, to put it mildly, with Mr. Putin not coming to terms in settling the Ukraine war. Trump says, we will continue to send arms to Ukraine, but the way we're going to do it is to have the Europeans buy American arms, and the Europeans then can be donating these funds. Let's listen a little bit to what NATO, our ambassador to NATO had to say, Matt Whitaker.
It no longer is the American taxpayer going to foot the bill for traditional security and defense of Europe. For 76 years, American presidents have been talking about that. Donald Trump delivered it last month. And now the next step is to make Europe pay for the defense and the support of Ukraine, which Joe Biden and, some members of Congress decided that the U.S. taxpayer and the hardworking Americans should be paying for that. Obviously, America makes the best weapons, and everyone wants them. And Ukraine, to defend themselves, President Trump's been clear they should get access to U.S. weapons. And so Europe has come through the NATO structure and said, we'll put up the money, we'll buy these American weapons, and we'll send them to Ukraine to defend themselves.
So that was Matt Whitaker. And again, Jeff, I should add that the president has said in a message that he is giving 50 days to Putin to come to terms on a peace agreement, or he is going to be applying an additional 100% tariff on exports from Russia, which will be putting economic pressure in addition, I should say, to military pressure by guaranteeing that Ukraine is going to continue to have American armaments. And lastly, the Russian economy is already not doing all that great. So we'll have to see what happens. But I just wonder, as we have to the 2026 elections, the president has had a series of victories of late with the big, beautiful bill and other things. And a lot of economists, a lot of people on Wall Street are saying the ducks are lining up that the American economy should be picking up steam and having real growth. And if that's true, come 2026, the Democrats are going to have to really put their nose to the grindstone to get some issues that resonate.
Well, Terry, I'll just mention, we talked tie again the state and national issues together, because Raja Krishnamurthy, who we mentioned earlier in the show, as one of the three Democrats running in the Democratic primary for the nomination of U.S. Senate for the Democratic Party to replace Dick Durbin, he just, as we talked, put out a $500,000 buy for his first ad across the state of Illinois. And the main theme, he's taking on Donald Trump, and he's calling him a bully. And he's saying in his 30-second ad, Raja grew up taking on bullies and dealing with bullies, so he knows how to deal with this. As he says something like, as you can imagine, somebody with the name Raja is going to get picked on a lot growing up, okay? So he knows how to deal with bullies, and this is their campaign. It's painting Donald Trump as a terrible, evil guy and going after him, as opposed to going through the analytics, which you and I are doing here.
Before we run out of time, for the primary, as you were mentioning, that's a primary ad. For the primary, that would be the right message for Raja or any of the Democrats, right? But they're going to have to come up with some solutions to problems that resonate with the American people for the general election in 2026. Jeff, we're going to have to wrap it up here. We're running short, but let's just remind people, I'm going to take a week off. I'm going to go on vacation, and we will catch up again. In the meantime, folks, continue to watch us. Leave us a message, and Jeff and I always read them. We appreciate it. And if you would, give us a thumbs up whatever channel you're watching our show on. Until then, Jeff, I will see you later.
See you next week.